cognitive behavior modification is an attempt to integrate the clinical concerns of psychodynamic therapists on the one hand, of cognitive semantic therapists, with the technology of behavior therapy on the other hand. It tries to build upon what the research tells us about the nature of behavior change, about the communalities that cut across different therapeutic procedures. It's not an eclectic nor muddle-headed approach. It grows out of some very basic theoretical positions about the nature of maladaptive behavior and a theory of behavior change. Let me comment on each of those. From a cognitive behavioral perspective, behavior, the behavior that a client brings to us, our own behavior, is a reflection of different kinds of processes. Part of it are the kinds of thoughts, beliefs, internal dialogue, images, the way in which we appraise the environment. It also is reflective of the kinds of feelings we have, as we'll see. Sometimes those feelings are dysphoric. It's also a reflection of the kinds of behavioral patterns that we emit over and over in different situations, and the reactions that occur from significant others. That is, this is a recursive process, and each one of those come into play in contributing to the way in which we behave. Now, it will be our job as therapists to make individuals aware of the contribution of each of those processes, to make the client aware that they're not merely victims of stress, that the way in which they appraise events and their ability to handle those events, the way in which they behave may often inadvertently contribute to the very problems they have. The very solutions that people employ seem often to help maintain and exacerbate their problems. Those are the processes that we're going to be looking at. Moreover, what leads someone to change, no matter who they see in therapy? From a cognitive behavioral point of view, the notion is that people have certain kinds of beliefs about themselves and the world, and that these views color the way in which they appraise situations, the options they take. Now, out of the strength of the relationship that emerges in therapy, people develop, the therapist helps to nurture the courage for people to try something different, to perform personal experiments in active routines. These events lead to reactions from significant others. The job for the therapist, we'll see, is to help the individual take those reactions and view them as evidence. Like scientists, clients don't often take the data as evidence that will unfreeze their beliefs. This kind of learning experience doesn't occur overnight. There are no quick fixes, no remedies. I get concerned about the kinds of protestations that clients often make, given the enthusiasm, the charisma, the personality style of the therapist. I'm much more concerned about what is maintained over time. What has the client learned? Before I comment on the goals and styles and techniques of this technique, let me introduce one caveat or warning. It's important to appreciate that cognitive behavior modification is not a panacea. While there's encouraging data for a number of these procedures with a variety of populations, it's important to appreciate that it's just an formative stage and still evolving, and often has to be supplemented by other techniques. What are the goals of cognitive behavior modification? Well, first of all, it's to bolster a flexible coping repertoire on the part of the client. There's no one way to cope. There's no remedy, no formula for dealing with the problems of living. Secondly, there's an attempt to help the client develop a sense of responsibility about the problem, a sense of empowerment, a sense of efficacy about their handling it, a sense of coping. The client has to learn that, get a feel for that what they're going through during the course of therapy is what Carl Rogers in one film called an irreversible experience. That together, I, as the client's coach, as educator, as collaborator, try to figure out how we could work together to find out how they could achieve their goals. There's another part to this educational process, to make the client aware of the transactional nature of their behavior, how their own appraisal processes, the way in which they skew experience as they perceive it, the patterns, searching for the patterns with the client about their thought processes, the way in which they behave, that entire collaborative effort becomes the basis of the change process. Moreover, it's important that the therapist ensure that the client have the skills to perform those personal experiments. This educational process is in no way a lecture. I've been a professor teaching college students too long to appreciate the limitations of what students or clients take away from lectures. Rather, the style is one of collaboration, a kind of Socratic approach. Perhaps you're familiar with the character of Peter Falk playing Columbo, a sense of the way in which I try to use my own befuddlement, bemusement. At times I play dumb. It's not that difficult, not only for me, but for often other therapists. Sense of not having to be the expert, but working together with the client. I'm wondering, to begin with, if you could just start off by giving me a sense of the kinds of problems that you have that bring you here. Maybe tell me a bit about yourself and so forth.
Right now, I'm very depressed over the divorce that I just went through. Mm-hmm. I'm very angry at my wife. I did not want the divorce at all. I wanted to see if we could work out our problems.
You hadn't been married prior to this?
No, this was my first marriage at 42.
And how long did you remain married?
We were married 4 years.
And could you tell me about the circumstances that sort of led to the divorce?
I think both myself and my wife were terrible communicators. We didn't communicate our feelings.
You say that you were poor communicators and that you really weren't able to share your feelings?
Yes.
Is that with your wife, or does that occur now in other situations as well?
It still occurs somewhat. I have been going to some counseling this past year. Mm-hmm. And the counselor has been working with me with my anger and helping me express myself and express my feelings. And I am much better at expressing my feelings now than I was when I was married.
Mm-hmm. How do you feel about sharing your feelings right now here in these sort of circumstances?
I think it's great. I felt that I've been sheltered, or I've sheltered myself. I haven't communicated with society. I've been practically a loner all my life, and I've never had a lot of friends, and I've never done any therapy at all, done any self-improvement books, and I really feel I've missed out on life, and I think this is fine. I don't care where this film goes. I think it's great to express myself now.
I am kind of curious about what would lead you, motivate you to sort of participate in this project.
It was an opportunity to show the world that, hey, this is not a bad guy. He's mm-hmm. all right, because I've made a lot of enemies in my lifetime. Mm-hmm. I've been sarcastic, mm-hmm. rude, cutting, and I've really been an angry person. Mm-hmm. And I feel like this is almost like an opportunity to apologize to the people that I've stepped on down through my life.
What I'd like to do is sort of get a sense of these behaviors. You said you were angry, sarcastic, and so forth, and now making the film would provide you with an opportunity to say, no, I'm not such a bad guy.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Are there other things that you might be able to do in your day-to-day experience to convey that same feeling without having to make a film? I mean, are there other things that you might try?
Yes. Years ago, when I used to walk into a shop, a print shop, mm-hmm. in my profession, And my attitude was that if you want to be my friend, you've got to come to me. If you want, you got to come to me and talk to me and say hello to me. That used to be my attitude. And I would notice that that not too many people would come to me and say hello, how you doing, what's going on today, let's go out for a beer after work. And now, today, after going through therapy, when I walk into the shop now where I'm working, I go up to people and say, hey, how you doing? What's going on? I open myself up to people.
So that's a change that you've made.
Yes, I'll open myself up to you and say, I'll be the one to say good morning, rather than waiting for the other guy to say good morning to me.
And how does that make you feel now?
It makes me feel much better inside. I feel so much better as we sit here and talk. I feel free about talking about these items. They don't bother me. In the past, I would have sat here like this with my arms folded and kind of glared at you, and I wouldn't have been responsive to your questioning whatsoever.
These feelings about sort of being more open, feeling that you're getting a handle on things, I guess is how you're describing it. Where else, what are the things that you feel you still have to work on?
I still have a lot of depression over the divorce, and I have a lot of anger towards my wife. And I think the anger and the depression are the biggest things that I must work on right now. I feel that I really don't even know why we were divorced. All I received in the mail from the attorney was irreconcilable differences. And I called my wife up and said, what the heck are irreconcilable differences? And she wouldn't discuss it with me. She just said, we're not compatible, and that was the end of the conversation. I think now I want to continue in therapy with my wife and I being there with the therapist and find out exactly what happened in our marriage and eliminate those anger feelings.
I'm a little bit confused by a couple of things you said, okay? And maybe you could help clarify that for me. On the one hand, you say that you're not sure what led to the divorce. I mean, there the paper arrived.
Yes.
But yet, a little while ago, you mentioned something about other factors that might have contributed to the divorce. I guess, as you put it, they were not communicating, not sharing. And I guess I'm kind of wondering how you see those two going together.
I'm speculating. I have some ideas, what I think, which caused my wife to file for divorce. I'm not real sure. I want to hear it in her own words. I think I know why, but I want to hear it in her own words. I want us to get together and talk it out.
And what's her attitude towards that whole?
We've been talking about it for a couple of months, and we've kind of been playing cat and mouse with it. Well, you call me. Well, no, I'm not going to do that. Well, I don't know. You know, what's going on here? And I think probably I think we've come to an understanding now. Probably within a week or so, 2 weeks, we're going to get together with a counselor and see if we can't resolve the hurt.
What do you hope to achieve there? You're talking about resolving the hurt, and
I want to hear in her own words why she divorced me. And I want to express my anger to her over what's happened over the last 4 years.
At that session?
Yes.
Tell me about what does it mean to express your anger? What would that look like if
I've got it inside of me right now. It's bottled up.
Tell me, let's look at that bottled up feeling.
I want to hit. I want to punch. I want to swing. I'm
hurt.
I want to hurt. I want to, when somebody cuts in front of me on the freeway, I want to run over them. If they cut in front of me, I want to hit them with my car because they got in my lane. And I feel that I want to get it out of me. And
get it out of you? How will?
I want to express my anger at my wife. I want to yell at her. I want to scream at her.
And how will that yelling, that screaming, help?
the first thing that came into my mind was a blown up balloon.
Okay.
You blow a balloon up, it's about ready to pop. One more puff, and it's going to blow up. And all of a sudden somebody lets all the air out. That's
and
I feel that. And as we sit here and talk, I'm just thinking about it, I'm getting angrier and angrier.
One kind of concern that I would have in working with you, Richard, is to find out what are the different ways that are available to handle those feelings of being depressed and angry. Clearly, letting it out, letting that balloon go is one way. What I'd like to explore with you is what is the impact of letting it out on that, on others? And what else? Are there other ways to handle the anger? What triggers the anger? How long has this been going on? There are a number of questions that I think our examining together would be helpful to look at the anger, the depression, and what you could do about it, what you have been doing about it. Let's start with, if in fact, after some reluctance, you were able to get your wife and you to come together with the counselor, and you let the balloon go as you describe it, what kind of impact would that have on your wife, on your relationships?
From the little communications that I've had with my wife since divorce, she feels like a rat. I mean, she feels like she let me down. She married me and she divorced me. And she feels that she feels like she's a bad person because she took the family, basically, she took the family away from me, the house that I love. She did all this stuff. She feels bad about that. And I feel that communicating with each other, with the counselor, I'm sure that the counselor, or I hope, the counselor would make her feel better. Look, you're not a bad person. You could not live with Richard. Maybe Richard ain't so great after all. You cannot live with him. You've got to put your pieces together and get going again. That's what I think she would get from it. The thought of her, right after she moved out of the house, and then I sold the house. She took a condominium, and I got an apartment. My heart ached so much. My stomach was just twisted in knots, thinking of her sitting in that condominium by herself. I was just all torn apart because I want what's right for her. And then, and so I hope that she would get that, she would eliminate that feelings of feeling like a rat, and she's a good person. And what I want to get out of it is just this anger that I have towards her and this anxiety, so I can get on with my life. Because many days I get so damn mad at her. If I could see her, I would never do it, but I want to punch her right in the mouth. I get so damn angry at her.
On the one hand, I get the impression, and correct me if I'm wrong, that there's a lot of caring. The feeling that you have right now, the welling of the eyes, the teariness, the concern. But yet, on the other hand, there's a lot of anger.
Yes.
A lot of that she...
I'm asking myself today, should Connie and I really be married? And that was the first time that question popped into my head, that was hard for me to deal with. Because I didn't want this divorce. I didn't want the family to go. I didn't want anything to go. I wanted our relationship to improve and for us to live happily ever after and be married. I didn't want anything to end, and I thought we could do it, but she felt different, so she moved.
Take a moment. It's okay. There's a lot of feelings.
Yes.
Let's go back to a question that I asked before. If you meet with her and the counselor, and you let the balloon go, if you vent all that anger, all that emotion that's welled up, what would I see? I mean, what form would it take? I mean, could you play through what?
I feel that I would be more at peace with myself.
What would I see? What would happen in the session? Would there be?
I would just let go of the anger that I have inside of me right now. I'm hoping to hell the anxiety would dissipate, and that you would see I wouldn't walk around with that little sarcastic glint in my eye wanting to punch everybody in the mouth.
The people who cut in front of you on the expressway, the people who don't come over and ask you out.
Yes, and I would be an open and free person, ready to communicate.
Okay. I am trying to understand, and maybe you could help me, if there are any other ways. What other ways you've tried to deal with that anger? Are there other ways to express the anger, either to your wife or to other people?
Express the anger.
How else do people handle anger? Besides just letting balloons go, besides smashing cars in.
One outlet is when I jog, I jog till I almost drop.
But I mean, with someone else, let's say someone else has done something that irritates you. You know, they press you, and they don't meet what you think. They don't behave the way you feel they should behave, and you get angry and pissed off. How does one handle that? What do you do in those?
Give them a piece of your mind. You tell the son of a bitch to go to hell.
I mean, come on, Richard. What do you mean? I cut in front of you. Don't honk your horn at me.
Kick your ass, you son of a bitch.
I'd like to see you try it.
I'm getting to wonder how serious you are here.
I guess I'm wondering, Richard, what else is there to do besides kicking one's ass when people don't?
Shut up!
You could yell. That's clearly one thing. Besides kicking ass and yelling, what else could one do?
Show love.
Show love? When you're all pissed off and the guy cut in front of you, you're going to show love? What does that mean, show love?
Reach out.
Are there other things one can do besides kick ass, yell, show love?
Understand that the other person is just a human being?
Yeah, like you. And you even talked about it at the beginning. Perhaps there are other ways to express feelings, of letting people know what it is about what they've done that you find so upsetting. You know, Richard, when you do X in situation Y, it makes me feel Z. Are you aware that you did that? I mean, is that a way that you might be able to communicate with your wife? I mean, I guess one of the things that we would do in future sessions would be to understand what it is that triggers your anger. What's common among those different situations? Have you...
I'm having a problem right now where I'm working. The fellow that I run a machine, and the fellow that runs the machine right next to me, we're almost at arm's length, like just like you and I are right all night long. And the guy talks all night long.
Just
He's
keeps
got
going
diarrhea
on.
of the mouth,
Right.
and he goes on and on and on. And
it just grates on you.
yes, and first I said, what in the hell have I gone to counseling for if I haven't learned how to communicate? And I've got down on myself because I wouldn't say, hey, look, Jim, let me talk to you about this problem of you talking all night long. First that went through my head, and then I was going to take him outside and punch him out. No, I said, that's no good. That's not right. And then, well, I'll just turn my back on it for a while. Maybe it'll go away. It'll go away by itself. And then I got to the point where I said, well, he's just a human being. The guy he's kind of a screwball. And I'll just take him for what he is. And he talks and I listen, then I walk away. So I'm tolerating him a lot better right now. Mm-hmm. But I'm still disappointed in myself that I have not communicated to him what's bugging me.
Right. So the fuse is still short.
Yes.
And given the right circumstances, it can go like that.
Yes.
And the question is, how do you communicate with someone that what they're doing bugs you, but without turning that person away?
Yes.
I mean, how do you tell your wife, how do you tell this guy that there are things that they do that irritate you, that bother you, but that you don't violate the whole relationship?
This is what I'm afraid. I mean, I don't really care if Jim is a friend of mine or not. I mean, I'm not going to socialize with this guy. So I don't really care whether he's my friend or not, but still he's a human being. I don't want to hurt his feelings. I don't want to be in one of those situations where we work 3 feet from each other and we don't talk all night long. That's disastrous. So I've asked myself many times, how do I communicate to this fella and get my point across but not alienate him completely?
Okay, I mean, that's a very reasonable request. And I think that in therapy, in subsequent sessions, we would work on exactly those skills. Not only with him, but is there a way to relate to your wife in a similar fashion? Is there a way to relate to other people without turning them off? It seems to me that there are alternatives.
And that's what I want to find out.
And I think therapy can clearly help you not only find out about those things, but also actually work to implement them, to change them. I mean, you have a lot going for yourself. There is one other question, one other observation that you made that I'd like to pursue a little bit, if I may. You said not only do you feel this anger, but you also feel depressed.
Yes.
And I'm wondering if you could share with me a bit about that depression.
The depression is the loss of everything that we've mentioned, including my wife and everything. The depression is also that I do not have a female companion right now. I desperately miss the love of a woman, the touch, the way they place things in the house. I miss a woman.
You feel lonely.
I'm very lonely, and I'm also almost to the point of panic or anxiety because I have had 10, I don't know how many dates I've had this year. I lost track of them. But rarely do I call a woman back up again because I just haven't been able to find anybody that I really felt that fit what I was looking for. Mm-hmm. Looks, personality, position. And I'm starting to get a little panicky about will I ever. Of course, I realize it's been a very short time, but I'm starting to get panicky about that.
Yeah. And it sounds like you have a shopping list and then you go around. Is that
a shopping list?
I mean, of the features that people should fit. I mean, you have this list of...
She's got to be good looking to begin with.
Yeah, and...
She's got to turn me on physically.
Okay.
And she's got to be educated.
Mm-hmm. So you have to, not only that, you have to establish some kind of relationship with these people.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Tell me a bit about the depression. How bad off is it, and when does it occur? And
it's peaks and valleys. I think the worst time is when I'm sitting at home by myself. I had just done the wash. I've just cleaned the house. And the football game was just over, and the no, this wouldn't be a Saturday. The football game would be over, and my team just lost. And it's 3 o'clock in the afternoon. I've got my food shopping done, and I don't have a date, and I have absolutely nothing to do, and I don't feel like reading a book. And I sit around, I get very depressed, I get feeling sorry for myself, and am I going to commit suicide? And just get very depressed. I just don't feel like talking to anybody.
Commit suicide? Tell me a bit about that. How?
That thought has entered into my head, committing suicide.
What are the thoughts do you have when you're sitting there and...
Well, the first thing I get thinking about is what will I write in the note? How will I fill the note out? And who will I address it to? Or will I address it to anybody? Or will I leave a note? Do I even want to leave a note? Screw the world. They're all a bunch of son of a bitches anyway. And I get thinking about that. Then I get thinking about getting my gun.
You have a gun available in the house?
I have 2 of them. Think about getting my gun. And then I get thinking about the mess that it'll leave. I would never commit, so I'm going to do it with a gun, see? And I would never do it in the house because it leaves too much of a mess. So what you've got to do is, I've got a garage in this apartment where I live. So I'm going to go down the garage and I'm going to nail up plywood boards on the wall and on the floor. So, and you see, you can't go like this because you might miss. You might get shaking so bad you got to put it in your mouth. You got to put it in your mouth and pull the trigger. Well, when you pull the trigger and all your brains go shoot, so they'll hit the plywood wall.
And avoid a mess.
And avoid a mess, right. So when the people come in to clean up, all they have to do is pull the plywood down.
Very considerate person.
Yes. And, well, wait, I'm not finished yet.
Oh, okay, go ahead.
And also, you put a big blanket on the floor, too, a big, heavy blanket, so it absorbs all the blood. And so when the people come in to clean up, all they do is take the blanket and they throw it together and take it off, and they're gone.
Let me ask you something unusual. What prevents you from doing that?
That the people that I leave behind will think I'm weak. That there are people that care about me. They've told me this. And I don't want to leave this world that way.
Right. I wouldn't want you to leave that way either. I mean, even though you're lonely, it sounds like you're not alone. That people do care. You've been through an awful lot. You've had a situation of a marriage breakup, changing of a job. There may be even other stresses in your life that are all coming together at this time. And I am seeing that some of the reaction that you're having, the depression, the sadness, the feeling of hopelessness and at times even helplessness, may in some sense even be a natural reaction to what you've been through. I mean, that doesn't make it have less of an impact. But on the other hand, I feel a kind of, how should I put it, a real desire to live, a sense of realizing new potential, of wanting to change.
Yes, that's very true.
And it won't be easy, okay?
I feel at my age right now, which I'm 47, I feel almost like I've been reborn again. I'm going to start a new career. very soon. And in 2 years from now, I'll think that the marriage was okay for a while. In fact, I was going to write my wife a letter, and I was going to say, thank you for coming into my life. And then I was going to fill it all in with about 4 million words of everything that I'm angry about. And then the last sentence would be, thank you for leaving my life. And I think it's a very difficult time right now, and I need therapy.
What would you thank her for coming into your life for? I mean, what are the things that she's done that you're really grateful for?
She's a wonderful woman. She has initially, not in the last 2 years, but initially, she taught me love, compassion, some understanding. It was beautiful being with a woman, not have to call somebody up and get a date. She was always available. She was there. She was a good housekeeper. We had a lot of fun together initially, and my wedding day, which even though I have a hard time with that right now, but I can say my wedding day was the happiest day of my entire life. And she taught me an awful lot of things. Okay, that was then. Maybe we weren't supposed to be married. Okay, fine. It's over. But that's why I would thank her for coming into my life.
What did you bring to the relationship? What did she learn from you? What did you have to give?
I don't think I gave her anything.
Nothing? If she was sitting here, what would she say she's learned from you? What did you give?
I don't know. I don't. I don't think I gave the relationship anything.
What do you have to give to those other women you want to meet now?
Because I have learned love. I have learned that even though my next woman is not perfect, she will be my next woman. And I'll overlook her slight imperfections.
Well, that's really kind of you.
Thanks, sucker. And the anger that I held with Connie for the first few years of our marriage, and that now are coming out of me, I really want to touch and hold and feel and caress the things that she cried out for and I didn't give to her.
Let me just give you a few kind of summary comments, Richard. First of all, I appreciate your openness and your willingness to sort of share, not only with me, but in this setting. I've learned a fair amount about you during the course of this time. And in future sessions, if we had an opportunity to work together, I would try to explore with you a bit more about the nature of your anger, the kinds of things that trigger it and alternative ways to handle it, both with regard to this person as well as with your wife and other relationships. I think you have a lot going for you, and I think it would be a loss if the depression got so overwhelming so that it colored the way you see things. I think that with the help of therapy, you can not only learn to relate to people in a constructive way. There's nothing wrong with expressing anger. I don't want you to get that wrong. But there are ways to express anger in ways that don't turn off other people. I'd also want to explore with you the nature of the depression, the kinds of thoughts and feelings that surround it, and what triggers it, what results in it sort of getting better. And I think that as you develop these relationships, there may be times down the road when you might get depressed or angry, but that going through therapy will, in some sense, be an irreversible process. That is, while those problems might occur again in the future, you'll be a different person. I want to thank you for enriching my life by having you share your experience. Thank you. I feel somewhat comfortable with what happened, but yet a little bit frustrated. I'd really like to see Richard a lot more. I have a number of important questions in areas that were not covered. I don't have a sense of the history of his pattern of behaviors. There's no sense of development, history, the background. Some of the data we had to do with his family that time didn't permit me to explore, and the pattern of these relationships. I also didn't have a clear sense yet of the patterns of his behavior. Although it emerged as he described the situations in which he became angry, a lot more work would have to go into looking at the patterns of behavior and helping him become aware of how he inadvertently turns off others, whether it's the many women he's dating, whether it's the person he's working next to, whether it's his former wife. To help them appreciate that he's not merely a victim of the way in which these people react. I also need to get a better sense of the kinds of expectations he has, what advice he would have for others, and what has he been trying. That is, before each intervention would be offered, and a fair amount of cognitive behavior modification has been directed with people who have anger, and especially the form of stress inoculation training and so forth. A lot more groundwork has to be laid. There's a need to explore the patterns of his thinking in terms of what are the events that trigger his behavior. Not everyone who cuts in front of him on the highway, not each person who provokes him elicits anger. One needs to help him develop a more differentiated view about the nature and function of anger. The other kind of topic that we got into, and I thought it was an important one and telling one, was not only the anger, and he felt it here. I mean, when he yelled and screamed, one can feel the tension. And as I mentioned in the introduction, there's a necessity to have people feel, so this isn't some kind of intellectual exploration. And Richard felt. I felt. The other part was the nature of his depression. I was taken and struck by the sense of helplessness and hopelessness, the amount of detail that he conveyed with regard to the suicidal ideation. One might want to assess in some kind of psychometric way the level of depression, the degree of hopelessness. The clinician needs not to avoid that difficult issue. One needs to monitor this over the course, especially as he starts to perform personal experiments, and there will be setbacks. How we anticipate and subsume it. One wants to make sure that the nature of the depression doesn't get out of hand. One starts to work, as I began, to start to reframe the kinds of events that he's experiencing, the kinds of thinking styles that he engages in. I mean, one either lets everything out or you avoid. Where's the gray area? Richard needs to explore that. You either sit alone, you get depressed, or you're happy-go-lucky. Where's the gray area? And what leads to that kind of behavior? There's a lot of work to be done with Richard. As I mentioned, I think that he has a lot going for him. I wasn't trying to be Pollyannish in any sense. I do think that he has a number of strengths and that he has benefited from therapy. I'm a bit concerned about his over-enthusiasm for therapy as the answer, the cure-all. I don't want him to be persuaded by some convincing therapist. I want him to learn the skills that will lead to him to relate differently, to gain the insights, the awarenesses that we all benefit from. The one thing that I'm most disappointed in is that I won't have an opportunity to see Richard again.